ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another exciting episode of Paul Brown Show. This evening, I have a special guest. He's Mr. Darryl G Gray, and he's running for Missouri House of Representatives for District 77. How you doing there, Mr. Gray?
I'm doing fine, Mr. Brown, and thank you very much for an opportunity to be on your show. I watch it consistently, and it's really a pleasure and an honor.
Great. And I'm glad to have you on the show. And tell audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've got about 40 years experience in civil rights. Reverend Dr. Ralph David Abernathy recruited me out of college at Benedict to work with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. I've worked as executive secretary for the NAACP out of Atlanta. Served in the Kansas State Senate for a little while, and most of my work has been done through the Progressive National Baptist Convention, which is the denominational home of the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. I currently serve as secretary of the Missouri Democratic Party, and I chair our Progressive Caucus for the party as well. I think you know I'm a former U.S. Army veteran, and just been committed to civil rights advocacy and human rights advocacy, really, Paul, for most of my life, beginning in Spartanburg, South Carolina.
Great. You're a member of Mega Psi Pi Fraternity Incorporated? Yes.
Well, there is no, listen, if you talk about fraternities, there is none other than the Purple and Gold.
Purple and Gold. Yes, sir. Going back into what made you decide to want to run for office?
Well, as I said, I've been involved politically, Paul, all of my life, probably starting back at Dorman High School in Spartanburg, South Carolina. I worked for a little while with Dick Riley, a former governor of South Carolina, helping to register and recruit college students around the state of South Carolina. Working with Reverend Jackson, also a fraternity brother, when he ran for president the first time. So politics has really been in my blood because I think that we've got to go from protest to politics to policy if really we're going to affect any change in our society, be it on the local level, the state level, or on the national level. And so I'm thankful that I've had a propensity, not simply for politics, but for public service, and bitten by the bug a long time ago and not able to shake it.
Okay, what are 3 key messages that you want to have on your campaign, that you're talking about on your campaign?
Well, particularly in Missouri, you've got to look at Missouri as being the center of America. Where the Midwest goes, oftentimes goes the rest of the country. And so as a civil rights veteran, I hope to bring some human rights advocacy to a Republican-led legislature here in Missouri. And I think that is important when we talk about issues of police violence, when we talk about reforming the criminal justice system, promoting common sense gun laws. Missouri has 3 cities in the top 15 of gun violence among African American men. There's St. Louis, number 1, Kansas City, number 4, and Springfield, Missouri, number 12 out of 15. And so we've got to work to advocate for common sense gun laws. We have the most lax gun legislation of any state in America. And just here in St. Louis last year, we had about 194 gun violent deaths. We normally average between 190 and 200, and we've done that over the last 10 years. And then we talk about climate change, and particularly environmental racism, lead poisoning, the reality of black communities that continue to suffer from landfills adjacent to our communities and dumps. And so we've got to begin water. the type of water that we're drinking, not as bad as Flint, Michigan, but the toxicity of our water. And so those are three things that I try to highlight. But unfortunately, Paul, there are really many, many more that affect particularly marginalized communities and African American communities in this state. And those are some of the things that I want to go to Jefferson City and our legislature and really fight for. We've criminalized abortion in the state of Missouri. I make people very clear. I am very pro-choice. I may be anti-abortion in my understanding, but I'm very pro-choice in my position. And so we've got to begin to look at those things and look at it from the standpoint of advocacy in Jefferson City.
Okay, Mr. Gray, for the audience in Missouri who may not be familiar, you said District 77. What does that consist of?
District 77 is the center core of St. Louis. St. Louis obviously is the highest populated urban area in the state. You're looking at a district that is, I would say, 70% plus African American. It probably is the district with the highest amount of poverty. Infant mortality rate is higher. The unemployment rate is higher. The crime rate is higher. So I generally have the urban core of St. Louis.
Okay, and I guess that's important because a lot of people, they need to know exactly, are you going to be the one to represent them?
And I think that's a very important question. I mean, Paul, my history, I think, speaks to that question. I've been a public servant all of my life. I could have worked in corporate America. I could have gone to law school. I was actually accepted to the University of South Carolina Law School and Dalhousie Law School, and chose to work with Reverend Jackson in civil rights. I've been on the front line. I came to St. Louis during the Ferguson uprising after the murder of Mike Brown. I've been consistent, and people know that. But in addition to my advocacy verbally, people have seen that I've been involved in public hearings as it relates to crafting public policy. Remember, as I said in the beginning of your program, it's important that we move, as Dr. King would have us, from protests to politics to policy. It's not enough just to shake the political tree. There are things that fall off of those trees. And Paul, if we're not in a position to turn that into substantive policy that really affects the daily lives of people, then what we're doing is in vain. And so I believe that people have seen not only my activism, but they've also seen my commitment as well.
Great. What would you say are the characteristic or principle that's most important for an elected official?
Well, I know that the good thing about your show is that you're very balanced in your politics. I tell people, don't be like Donald Trump. I mean, you've got to be committed and compassionate to the needs of your constituents. The office has got to serve the constituents. The constituents are not there to serve the office. And the office is not there to serve the office holder. I believe that, I'm also a Baptist preacher of 37 years. I believe that the old song says, let my living not be in vain. I think that people need to know, as an elected official, that everything that you do as you hold that office is to make their lives better, to improve the condition or state that they're living in. And when you have a community that has chronically and historically had double-figure unemployment, when you've got a community that seemingly lives in a war zone where there's a shooting going on every day. It may not be a murder every day, but there's a shooting every day. When you have people who are crying out for government officials to start really dealing with the issues of a marginalized community and not continue to take advantage of that community, I think that complete commitment and compassion for your constituents has to be one of the number one attributes of any public servant.
That's some key points there, Mr. Gray. And, this passion and this thing that you have is really important. And, it's like the qualities. What does you think is necessary to be successful as an office holder?
I think hard work and dedication. I think that this is something that you have to live, Paul. When you're holding public office, it can't be a 9 to 5. And particularly in an area like the 77th district, people need to know that they have accessibility to you. Reverend Jackson taught me something a long time ago when I asked him the same question about qualities of leadership. And he said that when you are standing in front of your constituency and they can reach out to you and you reach back to them, if you're able to touch each other, then you're being effective. You stop being effective when they're reaching out to you, you're reaching back to them, and there's a gap. You've got to show up at the community meetings. You've got to show up at the ward meetings. You've got to show up at the town halls. You've got to show up at the barber shop and the beauty shop. You've got to make yourself available to students at their high schools. And so it cannot be a 9 to 5. You've got to live this. And people need to see that you're dedicated to their concerns. The single mom who has 2, 3 children trying to make ends meet, the families where mom and pop are both working, but they're not making a livable wage. You've got to make sure that you speak to that you speak to the $15 an hour that is necessary, that you speak to the adequate after-school programs and health care that's essential. You've got to speak to what I call, common issues, everyday issues that would keep us up at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, trying to figure out how am I going to take care of my family? How am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to keep my child in school? Or where is my child at? Is he or she going to come home tonight? Or do I have to worry about over-policing in my community? And so I think that those things are essential.
Yes, they are, sir. Okay, how would you consider, what would be the difference between what you provide for this district and the person that is currently holding that position?
That is an excellent question. The person who's currently holding the position is a good friend of mine. His name is Steve Roberts Jr., and he's a lawyer. Exceptional young man. I think that what I do is it's like a handoff in a relay. Steve is going to run for the state senate. It's a vacant seat, and so the good news is I'm not running against him. I'm running really to complement what Steve has done in this district. He has worked hard, and he's kind of handing that ball off to me, and we're running that relay. What I bring that Steve did not have, Steve was more analytical. Steve was, from being a lawyer, I think I bring more of a grassroots flavor to this particular position. My work with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, my work with the Progressive National Baptist Convention, my work with the NAACP, my work with Ferguson Frontline Protesters, I think that brings a different dynamic and dimension. And My work in building coalitions and building alliances, I think will definitely expand on what Representative Roberts has been able to do in the district.
Okay, I know one of the key things that we probably need to talk to our community is families. How important is family in your life, and how does that mix into you thinking about other families in the district?
Well, I was very, I guess, and I'm trying to think of the right word here, Paul. My mother and father were both together. My father, 25-year Navy veteran. My mother taught elementary school. So I lived in a household where I had both my mother and my father. Uh, my mother and father taught us um, the value of family. That was important for us to look out for each other. And we were strengthened by each other. I think the dynamics of family from when I was growing up has changed considerably. I think that there seems to be, Paul, this influence upon the family today that doesn't speak to strong families. It doesn't speak to strengthening families. We've got a lot of single families out there, many of them doing exceptionally well, single parent households, be it mother or father. And I always tell people, I'd like to be very clear, having a single family alone doesn't necessarily mean gloom and doom. But, when you've got a single parent trying to raise children, it is very difficult. The concept of family, it's not like it used to be. You've got younger parents. These days, grandmother's 36 years old. Whereas back in my day, grandmother was 60-some years old. And so there is a difference where we had grandmother and grandfather in our lives, guiding mother, guiding father, being there as a supplement parent. But that's not the same now. And so I do think, Paul, that it is important that we do whatever we can to help to strengthen particularly black families, and to be able to support black families wherever we can. I think the church has got to play a bigger role in doing that. I don't think it's the role of the elected official to do that, but I do think it's the role of the church to go back into the lives of the family, to talk about values, to talk about standards, to talk about responsibility that families have to community and responsibilities that community has to family.
Mr. Gray, what legacy would you like to leave not only to your family but to your community?
Well, I always believe that we should live for the sake of others. I think that's important. I've always believed, as Dr. King, that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers, and that there is intersectionality, or at least should be, between black and white, between the educated and the uneducated, between rich and old, rich and poor, between young and old. And I believe Dr. King said something that I try to live by, that we need to build alliances based upon necessity and not necessarily desirability. We really are a beloved community, or at least if we're not, Paul, we need to strive to be a beloved community. And then in this month when we honor Dr. King, I try to live my life through the experience of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, but also examples like Dr. King. And so when people look at my life, I would hope that they would see those two human beings emulating from my life.
Pastor, Brother Gray, now I know you've been a lot with not only like Martin Luther King and a lot of the other people that go out there and fight for the people in that community. How does it feel to know that you have learned from some great leaders?
Well, I tell you, Paul, being in the presence of people uh, like the King family, the late Mrs. Coretta Scott King, and um, you know, Andy, people like Andy Young and Jesse Jackson and Joe Lowry, Ben Hooks, John Lewis. Just being in the presence of greatness. Rosa Parks. Being in the same room with Rosa Parks and Nelson Mandela in your life. My life has been amazing. And the guidance and the wisdom that has come from those kind of people. Jim Clyburn, our own congressman in South Carolina, I've lived a very blessed and gifted life. And a lot of times, Paul, just being in their presence, I've lived a mountaintop experience. But what they've told me and what I've learned from them is that you can't stay on the mountaintop, that you've got to go back into the valley, and you've got to be in the valley to help to pull someone or push someone, support someone who is in the valley trying to reach the mountaintop themselves. And I believe that to whom much is given, much is required. And I have been blessed through my life to sit at the feet, as you said, of some civil rights and human rights giants. But by doing so, I have an obligation to share that experience and to share that wisdom and to share their thoughts with others as well.
Darryl, have you ever looked in the mirror and after all those great leaders that you just named, that you've had the presence to be around and say, God, just thank you, or why me? I mean, because you named some awesome really, names.
Well, that is an excellent question, and I do oftentimes ask, I ask God, I said, why me? When you're standing on the front line, be it Ferguson or St. Louis, or, when you think about, what has transpired in our country over the years, the election of the first black president, President Barack Obama, and, being in the room with him, being able to visit the White House in my lifetime a couple of years. And, a little boy growing up in Spartanburg, South Carolina, attending Lincoln Elementary and Lincoln High School, graduating from Benedict College, walking the dirt roads of Spartanburg, and now, I've been all over the world. I've met some giants, and I find myself saying, Lord, why me? And then, God speaks to us and says, why not you? We have to believe, Paul, that God can use anyone, no matter what. And I'll tell anybody when I'm speaking, I'm not perfect. I've made my mistakes. I've failed in probably more things that I've succeeded in. But I think that that's the example. I think that when people look at my life, Paul, and what I've been through in my life, the good, the bad, and the ugly, but to also see what I've accomplished, that young people, be they black or white or brown or red or yellow, wherever they come from, can say, if I can see it, I can be it. And so I like to believe that when I tell my story, that there are those who say, I can do it too. I can be it too. No matter where I come from, no matter my failures, I can do something that is going to benefit the lives of others also. I can be a better person. And I pray, Paul, that would be my legacy, that because God chose to use me in public service, that I can be the best that I can be in this capacity.
Mr. Gray, we're kind of running short on time. What is something that you would like to say to not your supporters, but your non-supporter when running for this office?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. I mean, I just say to folk, look at my history. Look at the work that I've done. Don't look at me from the eyes of a personality lens, but ask yourself the question: am I qualified to do the job? Does my background and my experience speak to what you need your state representative to be? And I think if people are honest and asking themselves that question, Paul, I think that I would be successful in the August primary.
For individuals who would like to contribute to your campaign, how would they go about doing that?
Well, I think that the best way, Paul, would go to my Facebook page, or they can call one of our campaign numbers, and that number is 770-842-5210, and that gets them directly to me, or they can call the campaign office at 314-5410. That's 314-379-5410.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Darryl Gray, he's running for Representative Missouri, the 77th District. Mr. Gray, thank you for contacting us, coming on the show, and we look forward to having more conversation with you throughout this campaign.
And Paul, I want to thank you for the work that you're doing on your show. You not only do you educate and inform, but you inspire people. And I wish you all the best in your endeavors as well.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. For everyone, thank you for watching the show, and you be encouraged.